We have been talking about the fruit of the Spirit, these things that make up what a follower of Jesus is supposed to produce, both internally for themselves, but also, for them to experience themselves, but also in their expression to others. And we've said that's like any other tree, right? A tree should produce more of its own, particularly a fruit tree. You're going to see the fruit, the evidence of what that tree is. If it's an apple tree, you'll see apples. If it's an orange tree, you'll see oranges. If it's a strawberry tree, you'll see what? You're not going to see strawberries. They don't grow on a tree. You got to think. You got to think here, people. I got you. Okay. What fruit or what piece of the fruit are we looking at this week? It's the fruit of gentleness. Honestly, one of the most derided pieces of fruit of the Spirit in especially our American context. Do you know how we scorn gentleness? We do it as a nation. We do it as a church. We see gentleness and being gentle in our interactions with others as weakness. And we shy away from it. And we instead say, if I grind you into the ground, I've shown strength. I've shown conviction, right? And it's actually the opposite of what we learn here in Galatians 5. Gentleness is instead what is lifted up. And I would suggest that gentleness is not weakness. Gentleness is actually incredible strength. I want to share two quotes with you as people were discussing gentleness. First of all, I was a contributor to Grand Canyon University. They do some blogging on a variety of Christian topics. And Lauren Abraham says this: a common misconception is that gentleness is weakness or passivity. True gentleness, on the other hand, requires great strength and self-control. Gentleness comes from a state of humility. Don't miss this. Get your minds wrapped around that word, humility. You see, in order to be gentle, we must not view ourselves as better than someone else, rather than asserting superiority. I'm right, I'm the best, what I want's going to happen. Someone who is gentle wants to help others. And look here, even when they have been done wrong. That's the kicker. We're told in Scripture, Jesus says, don't love those who love you. That's easy. Even the worst of the worst do that. Instead, we are to love our what? Enemies. Those who harm us. Part of kingdom living is this reversal of our natural fleshly response to just take care of me, and instead to love others, not just those who are undeserving, but those who in fact deserve the exact opposite. Do you see what kind of strength gentleness takes? To restrain your wrath, your anger, to release your grip on those, to offer forgiveness and gentleness, that is a much harder call than just giving them what for. And I can tell you, we're all wired a little differently, so we'll lean into this more one or the other. My natural personality, especially growing up through until I actually started following after Jesus when I was almost 19, I leaned into you have slightly annoyed me, I will eviscerate you verbally. I will leave you destroyed and wishing you had never been born with nothing more than my words. And I prided myself in that. I was vicious in my strength, right? But that was actually weakness. And the strength would have been to be kind, to be gentle, to be humble. Another author that maybe more of you are familiar with, Gary Thomas, wrote a number of books, frequent contributor to Focus on the Family. He's a adjunct faculty at Western Seminary and Houston Theological Seminary. He's a teaching staff pastor at his church. He wrote this: gentleness, I love this, is a strong hand with a soft touch. A strong hand with a soft touch. Even before I came to faith in Jesus, I was raised in a very Christian world, but I had a ton of anxieties. I was constantly worried. I was very fearful. And I remember as a young child sleeping in my bed, and this goes way back, because it's back when I shared a room with my brother. Okay, and it became very clear that that was not going to be a situation where both would live to adulthood. So my dad built a room in the basement and sent my brother down there, okay? So I said he was like a sewer rat or something that sent him down below. But even before that happened, I remember going to bed at night, my brain would race and race and race. I just couldn't fall asleep. And I was at that point very much of a side sleeper. And so I would grab my pillow and I'd hold tight. And one of the things I started doing was I would picture as that child that I was literally holding on to the finger of God. And that would calm my mind and my soul, and I would drift off to sleep. Because the strong hand of the Lord that I could cling to like a pillow was what calmed my heart. See, gentleness is a strong hand. The strongest hand of them all is the hand of the Lord, and yet he shows a soft touch to all of us. Gary goes on to say, it is a tender, compassionate approach towards others' weaknesses and limitations. A gentle person, don't miss this, still speaks truth. You don't sacrifice truth for gentleness. And sometimes that truth is even painful. But in doing so, the gentle person guards his tone so the truth can be well received. And we know this. This is a message we tell our kids. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So I can say, I love you, honey. Right, I said it. I love you, honey, right? Is my wife going to be, love being communicated to my wife if I say it like that? No, right? So it's all that goes into communicating. It's having that soft tone, not just with the words, but with how you say it that makes all the difference. And I think these are great perspectives on gentleness. Now, when we look at gentleness from the biblical idea, there's one main word or one root word where gentleness comes into effect. This is proetes. And this is, especially in the ESV, it's almost always translated as gentleness or meekness, those kind of things. But other translations will often insert humility. And I really think that is a core meaning for where the gentleness and the meekness flow out of. It's like the gentleness or the meekness are describing the condition of being humble. It's the language of humility. But at its core, when we see this word come up, it is about that condition of inward humility. Now, two authors that I brought up a number of times in this series are Spick and Ernest. They've written this theological lexicon where they really dig in. If you think I'm a Bible nerd, these people, yeah, they make me look like a Bible dweeb. They're amazing. But they wrote this about this particular word in its root, where they say, blessed are the proes, or the proetes, because they shall inherit the earth. This is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. He said it is not the sociological condition, because this word could be used for that, the idea of being humble, the ones that are destitute, the ones that are kind of squished down. But that it's not the sociological condition that is exalted, that Jesus is lifting up, but rather the religious submission and confidence in God. It's the idea that, yes, I will follow this out of religious duty and religious affiliation, but that is built on confidence in the God for whom my religion exists. You know, my religion lifts up Jesus, and I have confidence in him. Therefore, I will live out the dictates of my religion, which translate, they say here, into patience and mildness. And we see this as kind of already fruit of the Spirit, things that come up, right? We've already talked about love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, or mildness. This flow here is here for a reason. And we said that before, they kind of build on one another. But if we're going to be humble, if we're going to be gentle, then that means there's patience and kindness in what we do. So let me blitz us through a few quick thoughts, because again, we're compacting a lot. When we're adding in a section a little bit, of additional teaching into our Sunday mornings, it means we have a little bit less time sometimes for these. But I encourage you, if you're not part of one of our life groups, to dig into one of those, because each week the life groups provided resources to dig further into these things and these questions that come up. So you can always check with me. I'd love to chat with you, but if not, check with your life group. If you're not part of a life group, let me know so we can get you connected, because that's where you can really dig into some of the nuance behind all of this. And here's the first one, and it's similar to what we said a number of weeks for a number of the other pieces that we've been looking at. The gentleness of Jesus. Jesus' gentleness is my soul's hope of rest. The very hope that my soul has, that I can rest, that I have an eternity guaranteed with the creator of the universe. That rest from all the labor, that is because of the gentleness of Jesus. Look here, Matthew 11. Jesus says these words, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you" what? Rest. Those who labor and are heavy laden. And Jesus in particular here is like, what does it mean to be part of God's family? And so often we work and we strive just to try to be okay with God or with others. We spend so much time trying to earn our significance and our worth and our value. And Jesus is saying, hey, if you are tired of working so hard, if you are carrying so many burdens, come to me and I will give you rest. He goes on to say, take my yoke upon you. Remember, do you know what a yoke is? Not the thing in the middle of an egg, right? Okay. Yes, you would take two animals, it was a wooden crossbar, and they would put the animals together so that they in tandem could work, but the animals had to be equally yoked, and that's another idea we find in Scripture, because if one was stronger, it would pull off to the side, but they were never perfectly matched, so it was always a struggle to be held in this and working towards a goal, because you're fighting against things. And at the same time, heavily laden is, I'm carrying too much. It's too much for me to bear. He says, take this yoke upon you for those who labor and are heavy laden, and learn from me. That's the thing. Following Jesus does include oh my goodness, I didn't know that. And not just I've accumulated more knowledge, but now I'll integrate that into my life. And he says, why should you do this? Take my yoke upon you, learn from me, for I am gentle, proes, and lowly in heart. Another way of saying humble. I'm humbly humble, he says. I have a right view of the world. What I come to you is not with pride and with arrogance and with forcing my design, but I come for you. And the idea of the yoke and the laboring and all that stuff would have brought pictures of servitude, whether slavery, bondservant, indentured servitude, those kind of things, because so much of the word, some estimates were 50% or more of the ancient Greco-Roman world were enslaved. So that was part of just that would have been the context. He's like, but if you're in that condition, if you're yoked in that way, you serve the master. He's saying, I am coming to you for you. I am deferring to you. And he says, and if you do this, you will find rest for your souls. And this is an interesting word here in the original Greek. It talks about the entirety of a being is what's going on. So it's taking not just your physical and your spiritual, it's just kind of meshing that all together at the deep core of who you are, you will find rest. And why? Because his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Do you see the verse 28 there? Hey, are you working hard? Are you carrying a heavy load? He ends it in verse 30. Hey, what I'm doing isn't hard. You don't have to work at it. And the burden is light. He says, because I've borne it. If you're trying to find purpose, value, your significance, what you're worth, I give it all to you. I've done all the work. That's what Jesus offers. His gentleness allows us to have rest for our souls. But if we've stepped into that, if we've chosen to follow Jesus and accept his forgiveness, right? If we've done that, then there should be an impact on my life when it comes to my own gentleness. If Jesus' gentleness offers me the way forward, then my gentleness should be affected, or how I interact should be different. So I'll say it this way. If I'm gentle, truly gentle, the way the Bible talks about, the way Jesus was, it will change how I approach the world. Not only does Jesus' gentleness get me in the door, offer me the hope for the rest of my soul, if I'm gentle in response, which the Bible calls me to, it will change how I approach the world. We're going to look real quickly at 1 Peter. 1 Peter, writing to Christians all throughout the early church, spread out geographically in different places. The Apostle Peter says this, all of you have a bunch of stuff, right? Unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do you know what all that stuff is talking about? Being gentle. All of those are pieces of gentle. The mercy of God, the compassion of God, all that stuff that we've received, we're supposed to do the same thing. All of you have this stuff, and do not do what you're inclined to do. Remember, we're generally not told not to do something unless we're inclined to do it. That's why they say, speed limit. Don't go faster than this. Why do they put that there? Because every one of us is inclined to go faster than that number. And it's like, every time you see it, doesn't matter what it is. If it said 95, you'd be like, oh, they think I could go 100, right? They're telling us don't do it because our inclination is to do something we shouldn't do. We say, hey, don't do something. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling. But they deserve. That's not the gentleness of Jesus. It's not the gentleness we're called for. And he gives an alternate way of living. He says, but on the contrary, bless, provide, make others happy. That's makarios in the Greek. It is to be made happy. So if you're doing it, it is to make someone else happy, to make them happy. For to this you were called. Not just because it's a nice thing to do, but literally we're called. We're purposed for this. The Apostle Peter says that you may obtain a blessing. And then we hop down to verse 15 in chapter 3. And it says, in your hearts honor Christ. Lift up, exalt, worship. Worship Christ, what we're called to do, and do it saying that the Lord is holy, that he is sacred and precious, the most special thing, so valuable that it's above everything else. And it says, always be prepared to make a defense. One of those little side notes, little rabbit trails that we could go on. This word defense is apologia, where we get our English term apologetics, or the defense of something, or in our case, the defense of the Christian faith. That's where we get it from. And the idea here is that sometimes we think that our Christian faith, well, I take it on faith, right? Sometimes when someone pushes back on some of what we believe or what we do, we go, well, I just take it on faith. Is anyone going to be honest and say that they've responded to somebody like that in their life? I know I have. Oh, yeah, all of you are scared, okay. I know it's true. I've heard some of you talk. I've seen some of what you post socially, okay? So I know this is going on. We go, well, that's just, I take it on faith. Well, yes and no. You see, the thing is, it is reasonable to believe what we believe. And this defense is that here is the reasonableness behind why. He says, to anyone who asks you for the hope that is in you. That hope we have, that rest for our souls, it is reasonable for us to have it. So we should be prepared to explain it. That's why I encourage and go over this idea of understanding what the gospel is, right? What's the gospel, church? Good news. Yeah, that was kind of weak sauce. Can you help me? What's gospel, church? Good news. Ooh. Chills there. I think that's your best yet, guys. It is amazing news about who Jesus is and what he did. It is remarkable. That is the hope that we have, and there's reason to believe it, and that's something for us to hold on to. It's not something, well, I can't respond to your intellectual whatevers. No, we can, but it takes work. We have to be prepared. But in doing all of that, having this intellectual response, not repaying evil for evil, doing all this gentleness, and honoring Christ as holy, as Lord, worshiping him, how are we supposed to do it? Look at those final words, with gentleness and respect. If you can replay in your mind the last time you had to communicate a truth to somebody that they didn't want to hear, where you're saying, you're wrong. If I were to go to them without you present, and I would say, so when they did this, when Mr. Whoever and Miss This, when they talked to you, were they gentle and respectful? How do you think they would respond? Because remember, the context here is not just, when someone's being nice to you, be nice to them. This is, even when people have done you wrong, just like wrong was done to Christ and he chose to be gentle, that when people do wrong to us, we choose to be gentle. Are we doing things with gentleness and with respect when we have to speak that truth? That's one of those brain splinters that I've been wrestling with this week preparing this, because I don't know. Even if I meant to be, did I communicate it that way? Because sometimes it's not just what you do, It's how you do it. And it's not just your intention that matters. Intention's important, but it's actually what you do. So that's a great question to ask. Am I being like Jesus in how I'm communicating truth? Am I doing it with gentleness and with respect? But lastly, for this morning, I want to say one other thing about me being gentle. If I am gentle, I want to suggest, like I started with that first quote saying, hang your head on, if I'm gentle, I will be humble. I will be humble. I won't be jealous or selfish. And those are two interesting words, jealousy and selfish. Jealous is, I wish I had what you had. And that's often coupled with, and I sure wish you didn't, right? It's like, who are you to have? I should have, right? And then selfishness is what I do have, I use for me and not for you. That's what's going on here. I wish I had what you have, but what I do have is all for me. That's not humbleness. That's not humility. And that's not gentleness. We're going to go to James, kind of what's called the New Testament Proverbs, where it's filled with wisdom. Okay? And not only is it filled with wisdom, there's a section here where it actually describes kind of what wisdom is. So in chapter 3, starting in verse 13, we read this. Who is wise and understanding among you? Okay? We're talking about, hey, being wise, what we're called to. You know, in fact, in the Old Testament, God himself is personified as wisdom itself. So this is a very godly thing we're called to. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, what he does, the outward, not just what's stuck up here, not just the intention of the heart, but what you do, let him show his good works, let it be on display for others, in the meekness, the proetes, of wisdom, the gentleness of wisdom. If you are wise, you are gentle. See, so often we think if I'm wise, if I'm understanding, if I'm really smart, if I got info, right? That creates like a hard exterior, and somehow we think that's good. I forget who I was joking with this morning about some very smart but very, very rich people in the world and how they're really kind of jerks, right? You know, you've got your Elon Musks of the world. You've got your Zuckerbergs of the world. You've got your Bezoses of the world. I'd love to see a cage match between them and then the cage to fall. See, that's not gentleness, right? That's jealousy. That's selfishness. That's my natural inclination because I'm looking at those guys and they're jerks, right? But they're super smart and they're super talented. And although my natural response might be one way to them, we have to work towards being gentle because gentleness is wisdom. But he goes on to say, James here, the half-brother of Jesus, he says, if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambitions in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes from above. Being jealous and selfish is not from God. It is never a godly condition to have, to be jealous or selfish. He says it is not from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Okay. Pump the brakes, James. He's kind of talking strong here. So when we're being jealous, when we are being selfish, James tells us that that is literally demonic. That is doing the work of evil spirits. We're participating in the work of evil spirits when we are jealous and selfish. And he goes on to say, for where these things exist, jealousy and selfish ambition, there will be disorder and every vile practice. As I've looked and I've been involved with a number of churches throughout my life, professionally, vocationally, but also just as participating in them. Let me tell you that jealousy and selfishness, when it comes into the church, you see disorder and every vile practice come into it as well. I've seen churches taken down over that. You will do it my way. How dare you get it your way? And that spirit, that blackness pervades individuals and begins to pervade the church if it is left unchecked, because the gentleness of Jesus is the opposite of that. Jesus didn't say, how dare you have, I want. He didn't say, here's what I've got, I'm keeping it for myself. He said, everything that I have is for you who have wronged me in so many ways. Well, I think our screen is telling me that I'm supposed to shut up now. We've gone long, I understand. We're trying to compact 2 messages into one Sunday. That's already hard enough. You're getting like 2 hours of content here. All right, here, let me sum up for us. Okay, the gentleness of Jesus is my my soul's hope of rest. If I'm gentle, it will change how I approach the world. I will show gentleness and respect. If I'm gentle, I'll be humble, not jealous or selfish. And so all around, I would say that centers us back into this idea that my gentleness is not only for those who are gentle to me. Remember, Jesus said that's easy to do. Your gentleness should be for others, for the very ones who hurt you. Now, this is not about having no boundaries. This is not about saying, well, if someone is beating you mercilessly, you should just let them keep going, Be gentle. That's not what we're saying. You can have healthy boundaries and still be gentle. Those are not mutually exclusive. And if you have questions about that, again, I'd love to help process through that, because I want to help all of us respect the image of God in you, because God's placed it there and we're called to that. But my gentleness is not only for those who are gentle to me. That's easy to do. We're called to do it the hard way. So I'll share this final quote. You can't see it, so let me just read it to you. To be gentle is to be tender, humble, and fair. This is Tim Challies. To be gentle is to be tender, humble, and fair, to know what posture and response is fitting for any occasion. It indicates a graciousness, a desire to extend mercy to others, and a desire to yield. Catch this, for me, it's the desire to yield to both the will of God and to the preferences of other people. For me, that's a profound thought. Because often I'll say, well, I'm a Christian. I'm a Jesus follower. I'm going to do it God's way. And that means I can squish anybody who gets in my way because I'm doing it for Jesus. There are whole movements in our society right now that are centered on that idea. And I'll tell you, that's demonic. That approach that I can crush you in the name of Jesus. Instead, I am to show preference for others. Allow for them to have preference at my expense. That is the sacrifice. That is the humility. That is the gentleness that we're called to. And I know what we're talking about, whether earlier on this morning, talking about some of the financial stuff and what that means for me. But even this, that I have to be gentle even when others deserve harshness. These are hard things for us to wrap our arms around. It's much easier to be selfish, keep everything for me. It's much easier to give others what they deserve. Even if I don't want what I deserve, I'll give it to others. These are hard things, but I challenge you, wrestle with them. Because there is a result when we align our lives with what God has called us to. There is hope, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control for me and for my world. I literally can help reproduce those things in the world around me. And that is a joy and that is a purpose beyond the scope of expression. I encourage you to wrestle with those thoughts today and in the week ahead.